Um, we're going to have a fun time. Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Abba, for your willingness and your excitement to reveal yourself. And we thank you that by your Spirit, you just connect with each person here right now. You know, God very seldom reveals concepts about himself. He just reveals himself. And so be ready for that. I so love in Matthew 22, as well as in Mark 12, the story occurs where an expert in the law comes to Jesus and says, Teacher, what is the greatest commandment? And I specifically like the Mark 12 version where he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength. I want to speak a little bit about this concept of loving wholeheartedly, loving with all of your mind and loving with all of your strength. You know, as we travel, we often see groups of people or individuals who are more developed in one area of loving than in another area. We are all individually probably prone to lean towards one area rather than another. To love the Lord with all your mind, or to love him with all your heart, which speaks more about the feeling, about the emotion. And when other people say, oh, you bunch of, head knowledge people, you should get busy doing the work of that Christ gave us to do, or the people who really experience him say, oh, these bunch of theologians, all they do is wacka, 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 talk the whole time, but they just don't experience God. And the people who love theology thinking, oh, you guys are so shallow, who just wants to feel God. But you know what? All those aspects are part of what makes you you. You are your feelings, your emotions. That's a part of you. You are your mind, your thinking. That's a part of you. You are your body, your strength, your physical reality. That's a part of you. And there's no use denying any one of those parts. In fact, doing it will be to your own detriment, because you cut yourself off from an experience of God that is way bigger than what you've experienced so far. Glory. So let's quickly look at each one of those aspects, and then we're going to take it deeper. Let's start with loving the Lord your God with all your mind. I love what Paul writes in Philippians 3, verse 13, when he says, you know what, I haven't quite got a hold of this yet. So often we think Paul's writings is included in the scriptures because he had it all together. Because, he worked it out and he figured it out and he's got this doctrine neatly laid out and wow, this is it. Let's canonize it and make it the boundaries by which you think. But Paul himself says, you know what, I haven't quite got a hold of this. He then continues by saying, for the rest of my life, I'm going to try and get a hold of what got a hold of me. That's right. Woo. You see, this gospel, this word, is first and foremost not designed for you to just understand and grasp. This is the word that designed you that understands you, that comprehends you. And in the proclamation of this word, an atmosphere is created. First of all, not for you to thoroughly possess this word, but for this word to come and possess you, to grab a hold of your heart once again, for you to realize that what we're busy with is not a bunch of data and information that you somehow have to press into your heart, but we're speaking about the encounter with love that will forever educate your mind to think way beyond what you thought before. And so I marvel at Jesus' wisdom in dealing with this expert in the law who comes with his kind of superior understanding and asks him this question to conceptually, theoretically, tell us what's the greatest commandment. And Jesus says, let's talk about love. So you see, love levels the ground. Love, a mother with her baby is as much an expert as the greatest student. A father with his children, a brother with his sister, young friends are as much an expert when it comes to love as the greatest student. And at the same time, we are equally novices at a love that is way, way, way beyond what we have grasped yet. See, this love is not just some inner, individual, private experience. We participate in a love that breaks every boundary. That's why Paul invites us to pursue an understanding which surpasses understanding, to know the love of God. Its width, its breadth, its length, its depth. Because in pursuing it, you're going to discover your own infinite capacity to know the love of God and to reflect it. And so when it comes to knowing the Lord your God with all your mind, it is always so good to realize that we are pointing to a reality greater than our dogma. You see, the scriptures themselves points to a word greater than what could be contained in text. It points to a reality greater than itself. You see, if this Bible could contain the Word of God, it would have been totally unnecessary for the Word to have become flesh. But there's a word that can only be contained in the context of human life. The ultimate destiny of God's thought is not a doctrine. The ultimate destiny of God's imagination is not the institution. The ultimate destiny of this word is human life. This word becomes flesh. And you know, it doesn't just refer to Jesus in verse 14 when it says the word becomes flesh. Of course it refers to him. But if you read the verse before and after, you'll see that it also refers to us. Because verse 13 says, you were born, not of the will of man, nor of the will of flesh, but of God, and the thoughts of God became flesh. In other words, God's not just thinking about you. You are a thought of God in physical form. And the next verse says, and tabernacled in us. Do you remember the tabernacle, that mobile dwelling place that was covered in skin? That's been God's idea of a dwelling place all along. Skin covered, mobile dwelling places like yourselves. And so what a joy not to be under any obligation, to have a doctrine that contains the truth neatly. But to realize that just as the scriptures, we point to a reality greater than what can be captured in language. Now, often people who are highly developed in loving the Lord their God with all their minds kind of despise the people who have got the emotional or the action side of this love worked out. And it's so good in that department to always know that God's never going to submit himself to your understanding of who he is. There's nothing wrong with us trying to get a hold of what got a hold of us. There's not a day that goes by that we do not search for words and for ways of speaking this message that more accurately describes the one that we've encountered. But we should never come to the place that we think our descriptions of truth is the truth. The truth is still beyond our best and most beautiful descriptions. Now, the reason we try to become more accurate in our descriptions is because there are some ways of thinking of God that's going to rob you of fellowship. And so that kind of stuff needs to be tackled with loving the Lord our God with all our mind. But you know what? You don't have to be an expert, a professional scholar in the Word to love the Lord your God with all your mind. To love him with all your mind simply means, you know what? I'm going to be honest in my thinking. I'm going to have integrity in my thinking. I'm not just going to blindly parrot and move along with the crowd and agree with whatever is said, or just agree with how I've been brought up in my tradition. To love him with all your mind means that there are times where in your conversation with God, God's not going to always pat you on the back and say, everything you believed about me was right. And I'm just coming to continually confirm to you how right you are. Revelation often means that God gently embraces you and say, my precious, you had it all wrong. I've been much better than what you've ever imagined. And you know what? There's places where I'm going to show you things about me and about you that means that you're going to have to say things differently. And you're going to change your vocabulary. And you're going to change your concepts because, hey, I'm better than what you've been taught. Now then, sometimes we with groups, and I mean when I speak about we with groups, everything that we say of groups that we with is true of us individually. We grow in our loving the Lord our God with all our mind. We develop in loving the Lord our God with all our heart. But we get to groups who are highly skilled in loving the Lord their God with all their hearts. And it's awesome. They normally have a whole lot more fun. And emotion is part of you. And you know, for us, it has often been a stretch to go beyond our mind side of knowing the Lord into this emotional side, because it can become uncomfortable. Why? Because in the emotional side, you're stretched into a place where you're not in control of this experience. Now, in your mind, it's much easier to be in control of your doctrine. But when you move into experience, into the emotion of encountering God, what makes many people nervous is, I'm going to lose control. Hey, how has controlling your own life worked out for you so far? It's sometimes so good to just let go. Hey, laugh uncontrollably. Yeah. Cry, weep with the greatest joy. There's nothing wrong or shallow about experiencing God emotionally and letting Him overwhelm you. And suddenly we become aware that this experience is not the experience we possess. No, we want to speak about, I had the experience with God, as if it's something that we had and we possessed it and now it's just a memory. But the experience of God is an overwhelming experience which we never control. It's just an experience we partake of. But it's an experience larger than you. Do you know that there's stuff larger than you? It's quite exciting, actually. Now, obviously, just like people highly developed in their mind can criticize those highly developed in their emotions so many times, the emotional developed people are quite critical of those who experience Him with their mind. And you know, sometimes it can become quite shallow if you only developed in the emotional side. Because emotions have a tendency to go up and down. And it's when they go down that it is so beneficial to know mind knowledge. To know that, hey, whether it feels like God is with me or not, I know He is. And so to just get overdeveloped in this experience and in this emotion, we've got so many precious friends developed in that area. I want to tell you that to love the Lord your God with all your mind will take you to heights equal to what your emotions can take you to. Start knowing Him with all your mind as well. Because these are different aspects of making us who we are. Yes. And if you just developed in one area, like, you know, sometimes it's so weird where people are just emotional, just mystical experience, just this kind of thing. You can say hello to them and they have visions of unicorns jumping over rainbows, and that's great once or twice, but you know, for me to develop a more meaningful relationship, maybe from time to time we can have a discussion on the mind level as well. And then the last one, the action, in terms of, hey, it's not just about the emotion and about the knowledge. It's also about loving Him with all your strength. Loving Him with how you live, loving Him with what you do, with the action of involving yourself in the lives of other people, with the action of being with those who suffer, of the action of serving. So I want to take this to the next level and quickly chat about two concepts that are very essential to understand in this overall experience of loving God. And those are the concepts of otherness and likeness. And I want to speak about the otherness and the likeness of God. And both of those qualities can be understood in the wrong way or in the right way. And so I'm going to, for those two concepts, look at the negative and the positive side of each one of them and take it through into what Jesus reveals about it. But otherness, it's just the word, maybe the more theological word is the transcendence of God. And that's kind of what we started speaking about when we said we point to a reality greater than what can be contained in our language, is that God is beyond our best description, beyond our best theology, beyond our greatest experience. It doesn't nullify our experience. It doesn't nullify our knowledge, but he is still surprisingly other. Now, the negative side of otherness is that when we so emphasize the transcendence or the otherness of God, and this has happened throughout history, God often becomes irrelevant. He becomes unknowable. He becomes untouchable, unapproachable. And so when there's an overemphasis on that transcendent aspect of who God is, on his otherness, he becomes completely unknown, even to the extent where Jacob would say, I've seen the face of God and yet I live. You see in their emphasis on God's transcendence, God became so other that to see him was to die. Yeah. And for him to visit us wasn't a very pleasant experience at all. I mean, people died, mountains shook, and things went wrong, and all of these concepts developed out of mankind's perception that God is so distant, transcendent, other, that the contact we have with him is really just an illusion. Because he is beyond all of that. Now that's the negative side of otherness. I want to show you the positive side of otherness as well. Because when Jesus comes to reveal who God is, he doesn't surprise us with how different God is. But what is so surprising about the revelation that Jesus brings is how much like us God is. He reveals God's name as God with us. In other words, the true God is not God without us. Yeah. The true God is the God who has been more involved in your life, more present in every experience you've had, more intimately intertwined with your existence than what you've ever imagined. He is God with us. Jesus comes and he reveals that this Abba has got no desire to hide himself or to withdraw himself from us. That his desire is to make himself known. That's why in John 1:18, Jesus goes right to the heart of the problem of why he came. He didn't come to just pay a price for you being very naughty. He came to solve the root problem. And the root problem was not all the bad little deeds that mankind did, or bad big deeds. The root problem was no one knows the Father. And so I've come to reveal him and to make him known. So Jesus comes to show us that it is God's desire to reveal himself, to make himself known. In other words, God, in what way can God remain other or unknown if Jesus came to reveal him and make him known? Because I want to tell you that there remains something extraordinary, astonishingly, surprisingly other about God, although he has been fully revealed in Jesus. Now, how can those two things both be true? You see, God is unknown not because he doesn't reveal himself. God is unknown because there is so much to be revealed that we're never going to exhaust the source. The one thing that Jesus reveals beyond any doubt is that God is love. He is for you and he is with you. And therefore, whatever you do not know about him yet doesn't need to be scary. Because the one thing we know that is that he is love. And so this makes his otherness a wonderful invitation to explore. This makes his otherness this wonderful adventure to say, come on, you've just tasted a fraction of who I am and who you are. Come on, explore. Discover that you're part of a story much larger than what you've ever imagined. And so there's this beautiful side of God's otherness that we need to see. That when your concept of God's otherness draws you into this place of confusion, of God being unapproachable, of God being unknown, then you know you are drawing away from the revelation brought in Christ. Because what Christ reveals is that God is with us. God is closer than what we've imagined. In fact, the reason you haven't found him is because you've looked too far. This is why when Paul speaks to the demon-worshipping heathens in Acts 17, he says, this God I'm telling you about, that you have groped after to try and find, is not far from each one of you. You've looked too far. See, when Paul tells his testimony of his conversion, he doesn't say, after 40 days of fasting, sincere repentance, quality decisions, God eventually was so impressed with my faith and with my sincerity that he met with me. Now, Paul's testimony is all that pursuing God was a bunch of dung. Because while I was persecuting him, God took the initiative to reveal his Son. Where? In me. In me. We've been looking too far. We've been looking too far. Jesus comes to reveal God just on your left or just on your right or no, Jesus comes to reveal a God who has always been with you. Not with you in your holy moments at church, with you in your suffering, with you in your confusion, with you in your deepest alienation from him. Jesus becomes everything we are, because it is only what he becomes that he saves. It is only what he assumes that he heals. In other words, how does he heal our wounds? By becoming wounded. How does he heal our doubt? On that cross, when he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is where God himself experiences what it is like to be God forsaken. This is the moment in which Jesus takes upon himself the mindset of a lost and confused humanity. And on our behalf, he cries out the question of humanity. He assumes our doubt so that we might become partakers of his faith. So, there's something that remains astonishingly, surprisingly other about God. If you've... let me carry on. Let me first speak about likeness and give the positive and the negative side. Now, likeness, I think, has been a scary concept for many years. We were afraid of overemphasizing our likeness to God for so long because, likeness can be scary as well, because if somebody's too much like you, it means that there's competition. It means that all the differentiation starts to disappear, and it has the potential to replace you. And so in that concept, we've been afraid of emphasizing our likeness to God, because in a way we've been afraid that we will replace him. I've got glad news for you today. God himself is not nervous of this problem. He is not afraid of being replaced. When he created us in his image and likeness, it was for the purpose of intimacy. And the greater the likeness, the greater the depth of the intimacy that is possible. And so he created us in his likeness. Now, I think what has happened as well over a number of years is we've discovered this reality, that God is not afraid of people competing with him. God's not afraid of people realizing the extent to which we partake in this divine nature. And sometimes that concept of likeness has been so overemphasized that all differentiation disappeared, and there are people so aware of their unity with divinity that no differentiation remains between who they are and who God is. You see, God is inseparably bound to you, but he is still distinct from you. So when we speak about distinction, we do not speak about separation. God is the one who sustains every molecule in your body, who makes every atom spin. And he doesn't just do it for you because you believe. No existence is possible without God being present. Hebrews 1, that he upholds all things by the word of his power. God is present, is immanent in all things. But that has led to what some have called God just being equal to the sum total of creation. Now that is the thing that I'm saying. No, before there was a creation, there was a creator. Yes. And so God is not just the universe. I think he is very present in the universe, but he remains distinct from you and from this universe. Now, why is that important? Because if there's no distinction, love is not possible. If there's no distinction, you are just adoring yourself. And you know what? That becomes boring after a while. Might be exciting for a while, But after a while, if God is so one with you that you don't know the difference between you and God, you're very soon going to become bored of your concepts of God. And you know, when you get bored of God, may I assure you that you are busy with your concepts of God and not with God himself. Because God himself remains surprisingly other and beautifully other, but so closely intertwined and knit together with you. So we've looked at the positive and negative side of otherness. We've looked at the positive and negative side of likeness. And I want to close this off with the last concept. How do we love God wholeheartedly? With all of our mind, with all of our strength, with all of our heart. You just trying to love him more is not going to work. You are made as a being that reflects. In other words, your desires and your love, even your beliefs, do not originate in you. Now that is scary for most people because we love to be in control of our beliefs, of our desires, of our emotional state. But you know what? The you that you are aware of is a very small part of the you really are. There's a whole big part of you that is unconscious. You know, if your body is designed in a way that if it reaches a certain pain threshold, you just lose consciousness. If you reach a level of stress, you lose consciousness. Now, what I want to suggest is that self-consciousness is a deliberate limitation placed upon you by your subconscious to keep you from being overwhelmed with who and what you really are. The gospel comes to expand your awareness. Say you are more than the memories of who you think you are. You are more than the self you've been aware of. It comes to expand your awareness, to make you conscious of unconscious beliefs. And so to love God more is not something you can just work up with willpower. This is why 1 John says, we love because he first loved. When you start realizing that you are by nature not an autonomous individual, you are by nature a reflection. And the reflection needs a reference beyond itself to be itself. In other words, you cannot be yourself by yourself. This is why Genesis 1:26 says, we are made as an image, as a likeness. We are created as beings that can be whatever we behold. And so, to love God more, all you need to do is focus on the enormity and the extent of his love for you. To understand God better, don't try and analyze him and work him out. To understand him better, focus on the enormity, the accuracy, and the detail of his knowledge of you. He knows you And everything you can know about him is found in what he knows about you. To love him with all your strength doesn't mean I'm just going to get more active and busy. You're going to also get exhausted. What you need to do is focus on the extent to which he gave his strength, the extent to which he committed himself to your existence. And the extent to which he did it was absolute. He became you, never again to be himself without you. See, when God becomes man, this is not just some experiment that he's going to go through for a few years. And you know what? He's going to bear this humiliating experience of being human. Come on, if you've been all-knowing, all-powerful, omniscient, the word that was in the beginning, it's a bit of a step down to become human. But God becomes human, and it doesn't reduce him in being God. And it doesn't frustrate him, because long before he even designed mankind, he knew that he would exist in the form of a man, in the person of Jesus Christ. And God is still human in the person of Jesus Christ. Can you see the enormity of his commitment to us? He doesn't become human because he has to. He doesn't become human because sin forces him to. He becomes human because it's been his idea since the very beginning. When God, in his own creative love, in this place of fellowship between the Father, Son, and Spirit, in this artistic expression of who he is, where he continually imagines new ways of being himself, this is where God imagines you. This is where God elects himself to become human. And he elects humanity to be his favorite form of expression. Yes, God is present in all of nature, as we see in Psalms 19, that day to day pours forth knowledge, night to night speaks. I mean, we can witness the majesty of God within the mountains. We can experience his spirit moving in the wind blowing over these beautiful grass fields and in the plants. We can sense God stirring within the animals bouncing. But in humanity, God becomes conscious even of himself. Woo! God's excited about your existence. God's excited about your life. Thank you, Papa. To love him is so easy when you witness the enormity of his love for you. Amen. To know him is so easy when you start realizing what he knows about you. And you see, his knowledge about you is intellectually not that challenging. When David starts writing in Psalms 139 about this knowledge that is too wonderful to me, he starts off with, when you fall in love, like when I met Mary Ann, my thoughts concerning her wasn't very complicated. It's kind of what Psalms 139 says. I just want to see her sitting down and standing up. This is what David says. You know my sitting down and my standing up. You know my thoughts from afar. You see, what God knows about you is a knowledge of a person who's in love. It's the knowledge of a person who has fallen hopelessly, completely in love So much so that he's willing to come and waste his life upon you without any guarantee of the affection being returned. But he just does it because he is love. He's fallen in love. He can't help himself. He likes you. He so wants you to see what he sees, because what he sees excites him. So David says, he knows my sitting down, my standing up. He knows my thoughts from afar. God loves us with all his mind. He knows you. He loves us with all his heart. He poured it out. He loves us with all his strength. With his last breath, he entered our hell. Because this God will rather go to hell than abandon you there. This God will rather live with you in your confusion, in your alienation, than abandon you in that place. This is why he joins us in our deepest suffering, and he says, I'm not a God who stands at a distance and tell you how you should live. I'm not the God who sits behind a desk and just organizes your life. I'm not the God who just makes judgments concerning you. No, I'm the God who becomes everything you are, who understands you better than what you understand yourself. The God who is closer to you than what you are to yourself. Because the true you has always been preserved in God. I want to encourage you to know him with all your mind by considering his knowledge of you. To know him with all your emotion, with all your heart, by considering how he has poured himself and attached himself to you. God is not unaffected by who we are. Now, one of the doctrines that came out of the combination between Greek philosophy and the early Christians was the doctrine of God's untouchability. That, in Jesus, he just kind of lowers himself to our level and he kind of experiences what he experienced, but the true God, the Father, sits behind the scene, unaffected, untouched, unmoved by anything temporal. And it's because of the philosophical idea of eternity being changeless. They thought God is there for changeless. Now, the God revealed in Jesus doesn't sit in a changeless state of eternal know-it-all. Now, this God invests himself so fully into humanity, and he comes to declare that I have no interest to control your destinies. Rather, I will put my destiny into your hands. And you can do with me what you want. You can even murder me, but I will not abandon you. I am God with you. Woo! Papa, thank you for loving us wholeheartedly. Abba, thank you for blowing our minds with the beauty and the enormity of who you are. Thank you for, by your Spirit, continuing to reveal yourself day by day, for the excitement of exploring the inexhaustible resources of who you are and who we are in union with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you that we can lose ourselves in you. that we can experience the joy, the emotion of encountering you. Beyond a tiny experience that we need to control. Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Abba. Why don't you just right now, just become aware of this love surging through your veins. This God who upholds all things in existence. This God who sustains every atom in your anatomy. This God who pulsates with life and love and light. Just become aware of Him flowing in you and flowing through you. Just become aware of participating in this divine union, in this divine dance, in this divine fellowship. And why don't you just reach out to the person on each side of you and just become aware of this God flowing through your fingertips, bringing life, bringing healing, affirming His love to every person next to you. Woo! Thank you, Papa, for this divine humming, this resonance, this awareness of your love, which is beyond our wildest imagination. We honor you. We love you, Lord. Amen.